We didn't technically see him get cremated or buried or nothing like that, so I'm kind of open to ideas on him coming back, but okay, so Daredevil Born Again, episode 7. First things off, you're going to have to kind of excuse me for my voice and just kind of maybe my lack of energy. Pollen is really bad where I live right now, and allergies kick in same time they do every year, so trying to fight that off, but we'll get through this. I don't think I'm going to spend too long on this because I'm not saying this episode's uneventful, but it don't feel as crazy as the last several that we've had. So let's just kind of generally talk about it. So to kind of pick back up where we left off of episode 6 with such a high with Daredevil coming back and with Muse, we actually pick back up with, I want to say, yeah, it's Hector's niece, and she's in the hospital. She's finally coming to, and she's saying that Daredevil saved her. And also the word has gotten to Fisk. Fisk is being told that Daredevil has made a comeback.
By the vigilante known as Daredevil. So he's back.
And he is obviously not very happy about this, especially after him and Matt's exchange. I think it was in the first episode where he's like, if either of us step out of line, you know, we're going to do something about it. And Matt is the first to do it, at least publicly. And Fisk isn't definitely happy about it. So he pushes his task force to hunt Muse. And even his assistant, Buck, he's like,
if he is going after Muse, it's not the worst thing in the world, is it? I just mean, for the sake of the city. For the sake of the city.
And you can tell Fisk, he finally says, yeah, this guy ruined like my 10-year empire, blah, blah, blah. He's no good to me. But yeah, so Fisk is still obviously holding on to those grudges, which I'm not surprised. But we also get to see what it looks like for Matt after all that happened with him coming back as Daredevil. Jumps in the shower, you know, you see some blood come off of him, and I guess he's kind of just, he's kind of coping or kind of feeling out exactly what happened and what he decided to do. And Heather actually starts asking about these bruises on his side, like, where'd you go? You know, what did you do? You know, she's definitely, I mean, her being a doctor is definitely part of it, but she's getting wise to the fact that Matt is always checked out and something just isn't quite right sometimes, and he's always in these high, tense, stressful situations like the bank robbery and these other things that he's experienced, especially very recently. But she basically, I mean, she does call it out. She does call it out. She says, yeah, you've just got a lot of trauma that's just boiling to the surface, you know, and it's scary because it may make you do things that you may not need to do. And he says, yeah, I'm aware of that. But what's really interesting is we actually finally get to see Muse again, but this time it's actually him out of the suit. I mean, it was theorized, and I think it was fairly well known that the skinnier guy who went up to Heather's book signing, I think it was in episode 1 or episode 2, and he said, I need some help. That's Muse. He actually comes up, he shows up to Heather for an appointment, and they start talking about how he took Taekwondo and some other things about his background, how he wants to be noticed, and he felt like he's not being noticed. And Heather's wise enough that she actually starts figuring out that something's not quite right with this kid.
And all I ever wanted to be was an artist, to be the person I am now, and that's all thanks to you.
That is kind of you to say, but I'm just the conduit.
No, you're the key. I mean, you've unlocked something in me.
And his nose starts bleeding. And he actually takes the blood off of his nose and starts drawing a picture. And she immediately kind of picks up that, yep, this guy's Muse. He's a serial killer. What do I do? How fast can I get to the door? Which he actually calls her out on, says, I bet you're wondering how fast you can get to the door. And she tries to get up and run, and Muse ends up knocking her out and tying her up. Now, at this same time, Matt actually goes back to his law firm, and he talks to Cherry. And Cherry's like, you know, I heard about what you did. You know, I told you to stay away from this. What are you doing? And he's like, somebody's got to do something about it. He said, Matt's like, now, Cherry, if you want to, please help me to figure out what he's going, you know, what he's doing next, where he's going, that way we can stop him. And Cherry's like, dude, I don't want any part of this. You're on your own. So Matt suits back up in broad daylight to go back down to the tunnels where Muse's hideout was, and he's looking at all these drawings and figures out from all these sketches and other art pieces that his next target, or he's got a fascination with Heather. And Matt's like, oh crap. And then he actually swings through the window and busts in on Heather's office. This is in broad daylight, which is kind of interesting. It's the first time we've seen Daredevil in broad daylight like this operating. But Muse has had her tied up, and he starts cutting into her where she's just bleeding and stuff. And he pulls out like a huge sheet or like a canvas to supposedly make some art with. But him and Daredevil have a pretty decent fight, and they keep going back and forth, and it's a pretty cool fight. And at the meantime, this task force is actually, Fisk's task force is actually down on the ground, and they're waiting to go up. And the only thing that tipped them off of where they're going is that when Matt was down in the tunnels where Muse's hideout was, he actually ran into that one cop. You know who I'm talking about. We're 7 episodes deep and I can't remember this guy's name, but Matt just throws his billy club at him and just hits him right in the head and knocks him out, which is so funny.
Hey!
But he's like, yeah, Fisk, I saw Daredevil. We're going to go after him. But it's funny. They're down there on the ground waiting to come in, and Matt and Muse are fighting. Heather actually picks up a gun and just blows Muse away. She puts like 3 or 4 rounds in his chest, and his blood is all over this canvas. And Matt also took his grappling hook out of his billy club, and I think stabbed through the shoulder and pulled him too. So like, the room's just a bloody mess. They made some art. And then he stabilizes Heather. Matt stabilizes Heather, and then he dips before the task force comes up. But Fisk comes up and looks at the place, and they're like, yeah, they definitely weren't alone. Daredevil's probably here. He said, well, that's not how we're going to tell the news and make it known. We're going to say that the task force took out Muse. And you can already see that Fisk is already trying to swap the narrative and push Daredevil away, and he's going to presumably, he's going to bring Daredevil into another light, but more as a bad guy instead of a hero. Also, I think this is kind of cool part of the episode. We catch back up with this gang guy. I can't remember his name, but he was the guy who was over the Irishman who went and robbed the bank, and he showed up in another episode. He's the one who owed Fisk like 1.8 million or something like that. And then Fisk said 2.8, you've got a week. He actually shows back up to the bay and meets with Vanessa. He's like, things were so much better when you were running things, things were better. The rules were better, like, why can't we do that again? He's kind of implying or trying to finesse her into maybe overthrowing Fisk. And even he's like, why does he want to be the mayor? Like, what's the angle with this? It just doesn't make any sense. And she basically kind of leads him on and says, you know what? Maybe I'll think about doing something about this behind my husband's back, which I was like, dang, I said, she's got some ulterior motives. That's interesting. Like, is she going to go against her husband, Fisk? And then we finally see her later, and she texts the guy. She says he's alone at this address. And we see Fisk sitting in a restaurant by himself, and he's eating a meal. And the dude just jumps out. He's got a pistol in his hand. As soon as he reaches up to shoot Fisk, boom, he gets taken out. And Fisk is just unfazed. And then we see Buck sitting in the corner, and he's the one who picked him off. Fisk asked Buck, he said, could you call Vanessa and ask her if she wants any food when I go home? So it definitely explains that Vanessa was in on the whole thing, and she more or less plotted him to go to the restaurant and get shot. So Vanessa really wasn't trying to backstab her husband after all, but for a second I thought so. But I thought that was a cool little twist of events. But yeah, I think this episode is definitely, I think it's cool that we're kind of seeing Matt kind of back in the suit and stuff, and just being Daredevil. And then it's also kind of ramping up the tension between Daredevil being in the public again, and then what Fisk is going to do about it with his task force, and how he wants this task force to look, because at the end of the episode, he has a very public newscast where he's got all these guys in his force, and he's like, yep, my force is the one who took down Muse, and they pick up his mask, for a shot. But yeah, it's definitely ramping up those tensions, and I definitely think it's going to come to a head at the end of season 1, and I would guess that he's probably going to outlaw vigilantes or have this task force go after him in particular, which is where we're going to lead into season 2 in these photos we've seen on set. I think close to the end too, we actually catch back with Heather in the hospital. They've stabilized her, and Matt's there. And Heather actually says, she says, I thought I was really done, but Daredevil showed up, but there's one interesting thing. And Matt's like, what's that? And she said, I think he said my name. He went, who? She went, Daredevil. I think he said my name.
Who?
Daredevil.
Breaking news tonight, the serial killer known as Muse is dead, and a Tribeca doctor is in stable condition.
And that's all there is to it. She flips on the TV and doesn't say a word more. So I wouldn't be shocked if Heather actually puts together that Matt is Daredevil, or he may even tell her. I mean, I'm really not sure, but I'm sure that revelation will come one way or the other. But yeah, he set the seed for that. We'll see what happens with it. But like I said, episode 7 was not uneventful. It just didn't have as much going on. But it was really cool to see Muse outside of the suit, what he was like a little bit, and then in the suit, and him doing some things, and Daredevil doing things during the day. But it kind of makes me wonder, is Muse really dead? Because I know in the comics he's got some powers and some other weird things about him, but as far as the show's concerned, he seems like a normal guy. But we're kind of left in the dark about that, so I don't want to say one way or the other. But yeah, we didn't technically see him get cremated or buried or nothing like that, so I'm kind of open to ideas on him coming back, but we'll see what happens. I'm kind of curious to see what these last 2 episodes of the season will be if Muse isn't involved. I guess it'll just be Fisk and Daredevil. But anyways, that was kind of like my quick thoughts of episode 7. Like I said, I wasn't going to go on too long with this. I don't feel great right now, and I've got another video I'm working on for you guys about Avengers Doomsday and Spider-Man 4, which will be out soon also. So yeah, I think this was another really good episode. It was strong. It wasn't quite as crazy as the other ones, but it was still good. I really enjoyed it. Just like I have the past 6. Still love this show. I'm really impressed, and I can't wait to see how 8 and 9 wrap things up. So, yeah. So, what did you think about episode 7 of Daredevil Born Again? Leave a comment. If you haven't already, consider liking, subscribing. I do a lot of videos like this, talking about comic book movies and this media, and just other movies in general. I just like doing this. But with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.